I lived in a house in Montana from age 11 to 13. Most of the time, I was home alone while my parents were out working. We lived in a fairly isolated area. There wasn't much to do, so I ended up staying home and watching TV. Sometimes, when my parents came home late, I would get myself ready for bed. Whenever I would walk by, I would pass the guest room, which would be usually closed and locked. I would hear crying and footsteps coming directly from that room. I was considered a brave child, and I wasn't really afraid of anything spooky happening. One night, I remember the most horrifying experience that changed my life. As I walked by the guest room, as usual, I heard a strange moaning sound, as if someone was in agony. It was different from the usual crying and thumping. Instead, it was more violent this time. I stopped in front of the guest room door to investigate the noise. I lay down on the wooden floor to try and get a glimpse of what was happening inside when suddenly the door flung wide open. I freaked out when I saw a truly horrific silhouette of a tall, hunched old man carrying a baby in his arms. I ran back to my room and locked the door. I went straight under the covers and laid there still as a log. I reached for my phone to call my mom. To my surprise, the line was cut off. It was still early in the day, but I couldn't move from my room. After hiding for an hour or two, I decided to peek out to see if anyone was in the room. To my surprise, the room was closed, as if it was never opened. This happens ever so often, but the man never looked at me or said anything when I walked by. Even the baby stopped crying ever since the door swung open. However, the whole house became darker and dull, as if spirits took over our house. My parents would always wake up cranky and be in a bad mood. They slowly began hating the house and always contemplated moving. A few months went by and we finally bought a new house. Unfortunately, there were no buyers for the old house. We had several trips going back and forth, moving our furniture and belongings. On our last trip, when everything was done being taken in, I went up to my room to collect my final belongings when my father told me to collect the spare blankets from our guest room. I kept refusing to go in there, but at last my father scolded me and ordered me to get it or else I'd be grounded. I slowly proceeded to enter the guest room. I opened the door ever so slightly, creak by creak. And there he was, staring at me with those dark, hateful, gloomy eyes. He was no further than 2 feet away from me. I squealed and ran downstairs to my father. I explained everything to him and he believed me and we sped off. As we drove off on the road, I took one last glance back at the house. There he was, standing at the window, looking straight at me with those eyes. I asked my parents if they knew any history behind the house. My mom told me that apparently there was an old man who used to live at that exact house for over 3 decades. He was always lonely after his wife passed away in a tragic car accident. Neighbors said that he was a really friendly and a kind-hearted person, always taking care of their children while they were working. One day, while he was babysitting a neighbor's newborn child, a fire started in the kitchen, and sadly, the guest room was right underneath the kitchen. When he tried to reach the metal handle, it was too hot to hold. There were even scratch and kick marks on the wooden door, but it just wouldn't open. The fire department soon got there, but the house was already burnt to a crisp. After hearing the story, I started weeping like a little baby. I felt so sorry for the old man, yet I didn't even know his name. Luckily, I forced my parents not to sell the house and simply leave it the way it was. Sometimes I would go back and leave a fresh bouquet of flowers at the guest room door. There would be days where the door would be open and I would enter the room just to express my feelings. Ever since then, the whole house seems to be more lively and less dark.